So this is Zach Henson. In this assignment, I was asked to calculate a one-way ANOVA using SPSS and to find a YouTube presentation and talk about its logic. So with that, I attempted to describe it and write it on screenshots to upload to Canvas, but there does not seem to be a way to do that. So therefore, I'm going to record a small video and use that as my presentation for feedback.
How to calculate a one-way ANOVA using SPSS. I'm going to show you how to input the data, do the calculation, and also I'm going to walk you through interpreting the results. This is a pretty simple example, but it should get you started. So before I jump into SPSS, I want to talk about what we're going to do. I'm going to take 3 samples, and each sample has 5 observations. So I have sample 1, sample 2, and sample 3. And again, each one has 5 observations. What SPSS will do for you is calculate your total sum of squares, your sum of squares between groups, and also sum of squares within groups. The way I input the data into SPSS is kind of funky. And I'm going to have 2 columns, and I'll have one column called sample and the other column called score. And in the sample column, I'm going to have the number of the sample, either 1, 2, or 3. Now let me flip over to SPSS, and your worksheet looks something like this. Now I will click on the column heading, and it flips me over to the data view, and I type the word sample. And I'm going to go over and change my decimals to 0 decimals. And ignore all this other stuff for now. I want to keep this simple, all these other columns. Now I type in the word score, and also change the number of decimals to 0. There are 2 views in SPSS. There's the data view and the variable view, which I was just in. And you can switch between the 2. And you might want to just try that real quick to see the difference. And I want to stay in the data view now.
And data
type in
view,
some numbers.
which I've already done.
Now I type in sample 1 5 times, because there's 5 observations in sample 1.
And here is the
And now I type in my values for sample 1. I type in 2 5 times now, so I just repeat 2 over and over again.
2 over and over again.
And now I type in my values for sample 2.
And then there's the values for sample 2.
And now I'm doing sample 3 5 times. I told you it's kind of funky, kind of awkward.
Now there's...
And then my values for sample 3. I should actually save this. So I'm going to click File and Save. So I click File, go down to Save, and I'll just type a name. I'm going to call this Example 2.
I'm going to have this as Save as Sample 2. Save.
And you can save this anywhere.
And it says
I'm ready to actually calculate my ANOVA.
I already did it. So
and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Analyze, Compare Means, and One-Way ANOVA. So I click Analyze. I go down to Compare Means. I go over to One-Way ANOVA. Click. Now I click Score. I click that middle button, and I add that to my dependent list.
Analyze.
Now I click Sample, and I add that to my factor. I call it my factor.
One-Way ANOVA.
And before I click OK, let's look at options real quick.
Goes to factor.
There are a lot of other things you can do and try, but right now let's leave all those unchecked. Click OK, and bada bing, right there's your ANOVA results.
And there's
now let me walk you through the results, how to interpret them.
Which are the same.
As you're probably guessing, the F score is 22.593, pretty self-evident. The actual p-value, p is equal to 0 in this case, is calculated for you. You'd be so lucky to have a 0. That's good. And if anybody ever calls you a 0, just think probability, and that's a good thing.
That's what he arrives at.
And total sum of squares is equal to 257.3. And I have other videos explaining what all this means in detail, but that's looking at total sum squares as one big sample. Sum of squares between groups is equal to 203.3. And that's looking at the three samples and variance between them. Again, I'd encourage you to watch the other videos on the playlist. Sum of squares within groups is 54. And that is looking at variance within a single group. DF is degrees of freedom. That column right there, that's in DF. Now, if I look at this row right here, and I take 203.3333 divided by 2, this is equal to 101.667, which is that number right there. And now, let me look at this row, second row. If I take 54 divided by its 12 degrees of freedom, that's equal to 4.5. That's that number right there without all the zeros. And finally, if I take 101.667 divided by 4.5, that's my F-score of 22.593, or that number right there. And this has just been an introduction to calculating ANOVA using SPSS. Not meant to be complicated, meant to be simple. Do watch the